Now, what are these for? What was the assignment?
The assignment was to design can labels and seed packets for an exhibition hall in Atlantic City for some, the whole hall had some Americana theme. I think it was a food company. I never did find out those details. But what they wanted was they wanted a garden with large seed packets that would show all the inventions that have been done in this country to show that America has a fertile soil for inventions, that sort of thing. And then there was another thing that had to do with food that was separate, where they were going to have big stack of tin cans, all different sizes, with a giant shopping cart filled with, I guess, these cans. And they wanted to have, something like 11 labels designed, and then they would reduce them. They'd, print them different sizes and wrap them around the cans, and it would be this large exhibition. And the thing about the can labels, they weren't just for foods. They were, the can labels were to represent all the cultural aspects of America. Theater, art, museums, ballet, all those things. So I had to think up things that would look like can labels, but also would convey the idea of music or ballet or dance.
Right. So here
now these are the seed packets, some of them.
It's phonograph, yeah.
Now this one happens to be similar in the border treatment. This is of an early phonograph and of an early washing machine. I tried to get a variety of borders.
I like that.
This is a sewing machine.
Yeah.
This is Polaroid cameras. Some were old things, some were new. The newer things weren't as exciting for me to do. But I mostly was trying to get a variety of
Your work always makes me smile. There's something wonderfully whimsical and almost comic about that. Some have that vacuum cleaner.
Well,
it's funny. Why is that funny?
I think partly the color. I think the colors are cheerful. I try to make them cheerful. And I distort perspective. I have my influences, I mentioned before, Steinberg and people like that who are funny. But they really go back to folk art. I'm very interested in all primitive arts, especially American folk art. And there's something that happens when you draw anything, like the most complicated or the simplest thing, when you stop making it look like a photograph, that there's something free. It sort of releases it from its form and makes you, if not laugh, at least smile.
Yes.
I don't know what that is, but there's something humorous that seems to sneak into all my work, and I'm not consciously...
Now, that washing machine is funny.
Yeah, and I'm not consciously
I don't know why, though. It's just wonderful.
What I'm thinking about consciously is shape and design and
color,
pattern and proportion, and even those things aren't quite conscious, but they're there. And again, you asked me before about how many steps go into this. A lot, until I decide how I want these lines, for instance. Do I want them all to converge into a center here, or do I want them to converge, little things that nobody would ever think about or even care about. And I get to a point sometimes when I'm working where I've got about 4 different versions, and I line them up, and I try to decide, well, now, should I do this one or should I do that one? And after a while, I think, well, if it's that close, it doesn't really matter, and nobody else is going to care except me, and in 2 months, even I won't care, that kind of thing.
Right.
So I just
And do you toss a coin, or you just grab it?
No, I'll usually still, right up to the last, keep thinking, well, I'll do a little of this and a little of that.
Your colors are still predominantly the oranges, the pinks, and the purples that you have loved all along,
right?
Right.
Yes. They seem to not change. I seem to be, well, this one happens to be very bright. I seem to be subduing things more lately. I don't know why. Maybe because I finally figured out how to mix those colors. But I do like very subtle colors. The house is furnished in earth tones, muted colors. I like the look of faded tapestries, and I think, again, that goes back to my interest in folk art, and although probably when it was originally done it was bright, since I've been looking at it since my school days, it's all mellowed out, and I really do love those colors.
There's a wall behind this table which is full of Naiad and Walter's drawings, some deep,
plus some things that we just like.
plus some things that you just like, but also Valentines you've exchanged with each other, and all kinds of absolutely marvelous things, including, is that a record album cover?
Yes, that is. A few years ago, well, about 12 years or so ago, I started to play the guitar. And I got into this whole thing. I started to sing. I never sang before in my life. And I would learn all these nice folk songs. And then I started to write songs. I would just write them like for Walter or for friends. I had a friend who was interested in ecology, and I did something for her. And, they just came one after the other. And one year at Christmas, I thought that would be a nice present to give to these particular friends and to Walt, to do a collection of my songs. I hadn't counted them up until then. And so I taped them on my own little home tape recorder. Found out that there was a man in Fairfield who would put it on a record. I can't remember now how I ever found him. And I went up there with my tapes. If I had known innocence is bliss, I didn't know how. They don't sound so great now, I don't think. But anyhow, at the time I was very excited about them because I had written the music, written the words, played them and sang them, and I was very pleased with myself. And then when I got them all done, I found that I had 12 of them. And so I called it my first dozen, and of course 12 made me think of a dozen eggs, and that was what gave me the idea for this, to do an egg carton, and then each egg has the title of the song written on.
Now, don't you have enough talent just drawing beautifully? I mean, do you have to sing beside?
I don't sing as much as I'd like to, but that was, I'll never, Linda Ronstadt will never have
She's
to
not
worry
in trouble.
about me.
Good. All right. Linda Ronstadt, you can feel reassured. Naiad, this work in progress is called Flying Objects and Machines. Tell us about it. What's it all about?
Well, it was inspired originally. Walter and I were invited on a trip by the Air Force. They have an ongoing program, the Society of Illustrators, where they invite artists down to look at the latest equipment, and hopefully the artists will then do paintings that then they collect. I don't really know what they do with them. I suppose they take them on tours around the country. Well, and you don't have to do a painting. They just invite people down. If you want to, you can. So we finally agreed to go down, and we were shown all the latest F-15 fighter planes and all kinds of things that really didn't interest either of us at all. People who love to paint highlights and shiny things just had a field day with that, but we weren't inspired. But then at some point in this whole indoctrination, they showed films of early flight. And as soon as I saw those pictures of Lindbergh and all those early planes, and the beginning of this film was done in sepia, and it looked like a nice old engraving.
Yes,
and then I thought, because up until then I thought, what am I going to do with this stuff? And then I thought, that would really be terrific, to do something old. So when I came home, I started to look at old planes, but not just old real planes, but toys. I got all kinds of antique toy books out, and I thought I began to get this conception that I'd like to do a big poster that would have all kinds, a whole pattern of interesting flying objects. It sort of evolved, like, as I worked on it, there were little holes in the design where planets and suns and things, I began to, and I included rockets and stars, and I even made up little
that a whirligig?
Sort of, but it's a sort of a plane that's in the shape of a bird.
Yeah.
And I just started to have a lot of fun with it. I did a lot of sketches. First I did a lot of research, then I did a lot of sketches. Then I had to think about the title. I thought Flying Objects and Machines is what it's about. And then I thought I really wanted it to look like an old page in an old book, And so I looked up in the dictionary and looked up flight and wrote out their description of it in this kind of calligraphy, sort of freehand. I don't do real, you can tell that it's not real lettering, but I do my version of it, and that was a lot of fun to do that. But in the beginning, I had all kinds of pencil sketches, and I would cut things out and paste them in, and, scotch tape a lot of stuff and stand back until I got, this was very hard to put all these things together, to have them all balance out in relationships. Then I had to balance out the color. Now, the reason this is a work in progress is because the color keeps changing. What happens is, this is for myself, so I can only work on it in between real assignments.
Yes.
And I always have deadlines and, always working on things. And then when there's a break and I've gotten everything else done, I take this out again and look at it, and then I see all kinds of things have happened. Like what bothers me the most now, colors have been fading, and certain colors fade more than others. Like all the purples and pinks have really faded, and the oranges have come up. Now, when I first was doing it, I was concerned about balancing, like not having everything orange in one corner. You sort of distribute it. That's one of the conscious things that you think about. What's going to look good within one shape and what's going to look good overall. And the reason I keep coming back to this is that I have to keep going over the color, and I haven't had a chance to work on this in quite a while. And actually, the longer you're away from it, the clearer it is as to what needs doing.
Is fading a problem? I mean, is that something that...
Fading is a problem in that I, for some reason, chose to use the wrong... Well, I used a kind of color called Luma dyes that I use very often. They do tend to fade, but I used a shiny board, and apparently it resists more. So the color doesn't really go into the paper, it just sits on top. And you learn, it's never too late to learn a lesson.
Well, it's very beautiful, even faded. I mean, I don't know what it would look like unfaded, but it's wonderful.
It's going to look nicer. It bothers me that I see the orange before I see the overall thing. It should just all sit there nicely, and I should only be aware of what I'm really looking at, really looking at the subject matter.
And what will this eventually be?
Then eventually it will be, well, I have two plans for it, or two possibilities. One, to send it out as have it printed up, send it out as a self-promotion piece, which artists have to do periodically, to drum up new business. The other thing is to, again, have it printed up in a limited edition and distribute it, find a distributor who will sell it in art shops and gift shops, so that I would get a, and it would be a source of income then.
Right.
Either way, it would be eventually a source of income.
I remember when you did the poster for Westport.
Right,
yes, for the bicentennial, wasn't it?
Right.
Yeah, which is perfectly wonderful.
Is sort of a vague reminder of it. I recently saw the actual quilt down at Town Hall. They had a show of quilts, and there was ours. And I just forget how good the color looks in the original. I mean,
yes.
I can say that modestly because I did the colors, but I mean, I love the quilt. The women who worked on it really did a beautiful job. But the colors are so much richer than the reproduction.
Yes.
I mean, I supervised the reproduction, but that was really the best we could get at that time.
Right, and the quilt now belongs to the town, does it?
It belongs to the Historical Society.
The Historical Society, that's
and
a nice thing.
They travel occasionally, and I think eventually it will be at Wheeler House permanently once they finish the restoration there. I think they might have it on one of the beds.
Nice.
Be nice. It was on
Yes.
my bed for about 15 minutes
Was
a
it?
few years ago when a photographer came over to, when they were publicizing it, and
Yes.
took a picture of me under the quilt.
Oh, what a nice idea.
Yeah, it was a nice picture.
Naiad, I could go on talking to you forever. It is fascinating always.